Hey everybody, what's up gang? Today we're at a cemetery called Machpelah. It's a Jewish cemetery. We're in Ridgewood, New York. And this is just a beautiful place. We're here to see a very mystical man, many of you know. Harry Houdini. Wasn't his original name. We'll talk about that. But there's birds chirping, spring is in the air. And there is nobody here. It's going to be a perfect day to take a walk through a very haunting and serene setting. Let's go look at some stones and mausoleums as I tell you the story of Harry Houdini. Of course, he was not born here. He was not from here originally. He was from Hungary. That's where the family was from. Of course, at the time it was called Kingdom of Hungary, an Austro-Hungarian empire, and they were in Budapest. Of course, his family was Jewish. His father was a rabbi, Samuel Weiss, and his mother, Cecilia Steiner. He was one of 7 children, and it is said that his father, one of the reasons they may have come here is that his father was involved in some kind of a duel, and it must have been a duel to the death, right? Because he survived, and they came here. I think the father came first, and Harry, his name wasn't Harry, it was Erich Weiss, and they came here with his mom on a boat, and they all joined up in the United States. They actually, first thing they did, it was July 3rd, 1878, they changed their names to German spelling, Wise, and Eric changed his name to Erich. They started out in Appleton, Wisconsin, and his father there was a rabbi at a Jewish congregation. 1882, the rabbi and family moved to Milwaukee, and they fell into really bad poverty. They were not doing good. So they moved here, 1887, New York City. Now, as a child, young Erich took several jobs, and he started making his public debut at the age of 9 as a trapeze artist, and he called himself Erich, the Prince of the Air. Now, this guy was in shape. He was a cross-country runner, and he won awards. And one of the interesting things, I'll give you the little tidbits. I mean, everyone knows the general story, but the things that I find interesting is there's a picture of him with all of these medals. Now, this would say a lot about who he was and who he would become, self-promoter. One medal was real and all the rest were fake, but that was Harry Houdini. He was a promoter. And that's a lot of the reason he was very notable and successful. But actually a minor part, because some of the things he did were crazy. That doesn't even do it justice. Well, of course, he was basically working for a locksmith, so he learned how to pick locks, and of course that would come into play. So he started his professional career as a magician. He called himself Harry Houdini, and he had named himself after his idol, Houdin, magician, and he was coached by a famous magician at the time, a guy named Joseph Wren. So he was pretty good, but he was doing kind of the Coney Island small-time stuff, next to the fat woman or the muscle man, and all, well, we could say the freak shows, which, it's kind of funny. I have to say, I just have to inject everybody says, oh, you know, like the movie Freaks and all that, oh, that's really bad. Yet today we have on TV, it's just worded different. My 1,000-pound life, or same thing, we just sugarcoat it differently. But anyway, Coney Island, the freak show, he's doing that, and he's not really getting anywhere. So he forms an act with his brother, and his brother, and by the way, these two guys are both in unbelievable shape. I mean, they're just working out, running every day, and he basically started this experiment with escape acts. So in 1894, at Coney Island, they billed themselves as the brothers Houdini. And that is where he met his future wife, who was a fellow performer, Wilhelmina Beatrice Bess Rayner, or Rayner. Call her Bess, that's what she went by. She initially went out with Houdini's brother, but then they ended up together, and she replaced his brother in the act. So it was called the Houdinis, and the rest of their career, Bess would work with him as his assistant until he, of course, hit the soup. Now, she never really stopped, but he became, of course, the main focus. So there was a guy in Minnesota, his name was Martin Beck. He's in St. Paul, and he saw Houdini's act. He's like, man, this guy's good, this handcuff thing. I think we can get that booked. I think that's viable. That's not just a quick act. So he booked him at this place called the Orpheum Vaudeville Circuit, or the Circuit, and within months he was hitting different vaudeville houses in the country. 1900, Beck arranged for Houdini to tour Europe. Now, they went to London, and at first it was kind of a bore. But here we go, self-promotion and wow factor. He went to Scotland Yard, and he challenged them. He said, I can get out of your handcuffs. And newspapers got a hold of it, and he in fact did. So that started getting some attention. Baffled everybody. So he ended up getting booked for 6 months at Alhambra, which was a popular theater and music hall located on the west end of London. And that show was an immediate hit. Between 1900 and 1920, he appeared all over Great Britain, doing all his escape acts, illusions, card tricks, outdoor stunts, and he became one of the highest, most well-known entertainers. In each city, he would challenge local police, lock them in their jails, the shackles, and he'd get out. Many escapes, he was challenged to be stripped, nude, and searched. He would still escape. So 1907, and throughout the 1910s, Houdini came to the States. He did great here, of course, doing the same kind of stuff. It was interesting. He was fascinated with the insane asylums at this time, called the lunatic asylums. And one day he noticed somebody, the guy's struggling in a straitjacket. He goes, there's an act. That's how he got the idea for that. So that was one of his telltale acts, the straitjacket. But of course, as he started getting good, like anybody, you've got the imitators. Really sickening. And he really got mad at that. That really ticked him off, as it would anybody. Well, he just kept upping the stakes. That was his answer. He kept upping the stakes, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, you've seen You've seen the pictures of the films, the old films of him being hoisted in boxes and dropped in the river. Thousands and thousands would come out. He'd get out of the box and way down there, he'd just stay underwater he could hold his breath for almost 3 minutes or 3 minutes. And everyone thought he was dead, and then he'd come up with the handcuffs, you know. All kinds of crazy stuff. At the newspaper, the newspapers were following him around, and he would have stunts where they'd crank him up by his ankles, right by the windows, 10 stories up, and he would escape. The scariest one that I think, the scariest one is the one where it's that milk, the big milk thing, I don't know what it's called. And he would go in there full of water, and I couldn't even imagine. And then the beer companies challenged him. They do, hey, do one for beer. Of course, they're after promotion. So here's what happens. You know, beer's not like water. Now, what his trick would be, when he would go in, the water would splash up, so the water level would be, you know, there'd be some airspace on top. Close the lid, and he could take a few breaths. He could go a while. But when you do it in beer, that's all like, I think it's CO2 up there. He almost died. They had to get hatchets or whatever and get him out of there. They had to save him. And I think that happened a few times. You always have the crew ready to help him out. He had a crazy trick in Boston. They had some kind of shark or whale, or it was some 1,500 pounds, some type of, they called it a sea monster, of course. It had washed up on the beach, and they challenged him to get out of the carcass, shackled. That almost killed him. Why? Because I guess they had embalmed it, and all those chemicals knocked him out. He was poisoned from the fluids. Of course, he did the Chinese water torture cell. I think that was a response to all the copycats. I think he worked on that in his shop for years. His most famous trick. Suspended upside down in a locked glass and steel cabinet. Fill it with water. Hold your breath. Curtain closes. Get out. So I have to wonder how I mean, every time you're taking a huge chance, a massive chance with your life, even with a crew standing there. Now, he also became an aviator, and his claim to fame is first pilot to ever fly in Australia. I bet most of you didn't know that. But later on, when he was kind of slowing down, retiring, I really got into debunking spiritualists. In the 1920s, he was really going after the psychics and mediums. Of course, his training in magic allowed him to expose these frauds. And he really got mad because it was like, these people are taking advantage of people like World War I. Everyone, they're talking to my son, his spirit. These people are taking advantage of these poor people for all their money, tricking them. Oh, that made him mad. So he would go in disguise, thwart them, and the press would follow him around for that. And he was successful. He debunked some real famous people. The seances. Now, before Houdini died, he had a pact with Bess. He said, if I die, I'm going to try and communicate with you. And we have a message. And the message would be, Rosabelle, believe. It was their secret code. Rosabelle was their favorite song. And they would hold seances on Halloween after his death. We're going to talk about his death. every year. No luck. There was somebody that figured it out, you know, like anything, and tried to sham her. You know, what was their favorite song? Maybe that's it, right? Well, they did it for 10 years, and they said, well, she said, if he's not coming now, 10 years is long enough to wait for any man. And they stopped, but many, many magicians today, still today, they do it on Halloween, hoping to reach Houdini. Interestingly, like us, all of us here, he was very fascinated with death, cemeteries. He would go to scenes of death also, like schoolhouse fire, and see the bodies of the children, the charred bodies. He was fascinated with that. He went to the graves of all the magicians, of course. Well, his end would come early, way too early. He was in Canada. Have you ever heard of McGill University? So he's at McGill University, and he's doing some speaking there. And after the lecture, he's in his room, and he's got a broken ankle or something from a previous act. Maybe it was there or the night before. Not feeling good. He's laying on the sofa reading papers, and these two guys walk in. I think one of them was an artist, and he was sketching Houdini. And the other guy that came in, he said, hey, can I sock you in the gut? You know, I heard you can take any punch, is that true? And he said, oh yes. I don't think he was planning on it. But as he started to get up, this guy, his name was Jocelyn Gordon Whitehead, big guy, and Houdini is just getting up, not even ready, halfway up, and the guy hits him below the belt with a massive blow. And of course, Houdini's not ready. He doubles over and almost hits the ground and says, that will be enough. Well, sadly, what happened was that had either contributed to or was the sole reason of rupturing his appendix. Now, it wouldn't have been a huge problem if Houdini would have gone to the doctor, because he had the pain. And I think he actually finally went to the doctor a day or two later, and they said, do not perform. And people were saying, don't perform. Well, I've got to do this one more performance. So he goes in, he's like doing the performance, and he's passing out. Finally get him to the hospital, and they operate. As you know, he had that blood poisoning and ruptured really bad. In those days, that's certain death. He fought it for a while. I think it was a couple days or whatever, but finally his brother leaned over and he said, I just can't fight anymore. And with that, he slipped away. Slipped away. That was it. And here we are at the grave of the Houdini family, Vice. This is the family plot of Houdini, the entire family. Let's enter. Take a close look at the statue. It says Harry Houdini on it. on the bottom. Looks like it's made of, looks like marble, but I don't know. A very good likeness, of course. Somebody left some cards here. Now there has been trouble here at this plot, of course. People vandalizing, the same old thing we always hear about. This bust, actually, the original was added in 1927. And it is a rarity because busts are really, this kind of stuff is forbidden at Jewish cemeteries, or was. I can tell you I've been to a lot of Jewish cemeteries, and we see the pictures. I don't know about statues, I can't remember. But this got vandalized, and there's been many busts. In 1975 it was destroyed by vandals, and there were temporary ones. 2011 there was a group called the self-named Houdini Commandos. They're from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Houdini Museum, I think they're the ones who placed this permanent bust here. And nice job. His widow Bess, who is over here, died of a heart attack February 11th, 1943. She was 67. She was in Needles, California. And she wanted to be next to him, but they said, no, you're a Catholic. I think it was her family. Because eventually she must have been allowed, because this says, now, and you tell me, I don't know if she's here, but it says Houdini with his dates, when he died, and beloved wife Wilhelmina Beatrice, 1876 to 19 something. Interesting, look at that. So I don't think she is here. This is Houdini's. He's under there. This is where he's at. Now, interestingly, very interestingly, he asked before he died that he had an obsession with his mother, and not a bad obsession, but he loved her so much. He was fixated on her. Even in his shows, he would come out and he said, Mom, did you see that? My mom saw that. Mom saw me. He wanted to make his mother proud. He loved her so much. When she died, it almost killed him. So he is buried here, down there, and under his head on that pillow is the stack of all the letters from his mom as his pillow. The letters from his mom. Houdini, by the way, would write letters to Bess every day, wherever they were, little secret love notes. Really great guy. Really great guy. There's a lot of other people here. You can look on Find a Grave to see who they were. Here's Houdini, one of the greatest showmen that ever lived. And I'd say one of the bravest and most courageous to do some of the things he did. Wow. Rest in peace, Houdini, and rest in peace to the Weiss family, to everyone.
When you hear my voice, it's me, girl. Roosevelt, believe.